Good morning. Good moed. Okay, let's get started. I guess most people will probably catch the recording, except for Rosa, who's wide awake. Ken, we ready? Yummy? Okay, hope so. Now today's daf. I'm sorry?
It's okay. I was just saying Tehillim. It's okay. Yeah, I was in the midst of Tehillim. It's okay.
Okay, you we need a minute?
No, it's okay.
Okay, today's daf in Masechet Bava Batra, continuing. Today's the fourth day of Sukkot, second day of Chol HaMoed. And we are up to Daf Kuf Yud Zayin in Parak Yesh Nochlim, continuing the very fascinating discussion about how Yerusha is passed down. We obviously are not done, so don't think all your questions are going to be answered. We've got a long way to go to get to some of the more complex cases where there are mixed families, many Yeroshim, et cetera, et cetera. But and of course, we're actually going to get to later the question about whether you can change this. Because the point is, this is everything that the Torah demands. What if a person changes their mind? What if a person decides they really like their second child over their first child? So if you recall, there's a pasuk that addresses that, right? It says, Lo yivaker, lo yuchal levaker. You're not allowed to turn a ben ha'ahuva, right? If you have a wife that you really love and one wife you don't love, and the bechar comes from the wife you ben hasnua, you're not supposed to change the order. Of course, people nowadays do this all the time. And so the question is going to be, how do you do that? Are you allowed to do that? Et cetera, et cetera. But we are still figuring out the right way. And so we talked a lot last week about the Seder of the Nachala, the child for son, and then daughter, then father, then brother, from the father, then uncle, etc. And we talked last few days over Yom Tif, to those who learned over Yom Tif, that that it's not just the child, it's any descendants from that child. So a great grandchild is a child, basically. Today, we're up to a Mishnah, Daf Kuf Tet Zayin Amabet. Rosa, you got it there on the Mishnah, 4 lines in the bottom, which introduces us to where we, obviously learn most of these halachot from, and that is from the Benot Slavchad, right? Because that's where the Torah actually lays out the Seder HaNachala. So it says the Mishnah something very interesting. And this gets to a detail that if you've learned Chumash, you've seen it in Rashi, it's very confusing, which is how exactly was the land in Eretz Yisrael apportioned? Okay. So this is because all Nachla started at one point. They came into the land of Israel. They had gorolot. They had these lots that the Torah talks about, the Navi talks about, and different families within every shevet got different portions. How did they decide on portions? So it says, or I'm about to discuss that question, and I'll just give a little tease because we have time, which is that there's two different ways you could have thought of doing it, and there are many ways in between. One is that it could be based on the people who came into the land of Israel. Whoever was standing, now we usually call men above the age of 20 as people with standing, because that's who's in the army. Anyone who's above that age, when they walk into Israel, gets a portion. If there are 600,000 people or 500,000 people or whatever number, there's that number of portions. If one of those people has 5 kids and one of those people has 1 kid, the one with 1 kid is obviously going to have more of a portion, the kid, than the 5 children, because they're going to have to split it 5 ways, or if there's a Bechar, maybe 6 ways. That's one way. Those are what are called Ba'ei Aretz. You go to the ones coming into the land. The other possibility is that it could be based on the people who left Egypt. We'll see why, because I'm actually going to come out that way, that the psukim implied to Moshe Rabbeinu that Hashem's going to give the land to those who Moshe goes to speak to. Right now, Moshe, of course, went to speak to the people in Mitzrayim, not the people entering Eretz Yisrael. Or he spoke to them, but he didn't go in with them. So those who left Mitzrayim, now a very interesting detail that if you recall from Chumash, is that every single man who left Mitzrayim died in the desert, right? Except for Yoshua and Kalev, right? And maybe Shevet Levi, but they didn't get Nachala. So the question would then be those who left Mitzrayim, what about they left? Let's say again, there were hundreds of thousands of people, but one family each family had a father. One father had 3 sons, and one father had 1 son. So then those kids went into Eretz Yisrael, they would be starting off with different portions, right? The one with only 1 son would get a full portion. The one with 3 sons would have to split it 3 ways. So those are Yotzei Mitzrayim, those who left Egypt, Nitchalka Haaretz, right? Even though they weren't alive. but it would be based on their genealogy. So says our Mishnah now, and in that background, what about the Menot Tzlaf? Because if you recall, of course, the Menot Tzlaf, we're talking in the desert. Now, it's obvious from the Benot Tzlaf that you can't say that the Yerusha was given to those who entered Eretz Yisrael. Because if Benot Tzlaf's father died in the desert, and they're about to go into Israel with 5 daughters, and they say, we have no nachala, there's no solution for that. Because if their father's dead, and he doesn't get a nachala because he's not alive, of course the daughters get no nachala. It's just the way it is. You're born into a poor family, right? So it must be that they think they should have a claim to nachala because their father, who's dead, left Egypt and should have acquired a portion at that point. So it says our Mishnah on Daf Kuf Tetzayin Amabet, Benot Tzlafchad. Now the daughters of Tzlafchad, who again had to split it 5 ways, but they Natlu Shlosha Chalakim Benachala. They actually got 3 independent portions of land in Israel. First of all, Chelek Avihem, right? They had a portion from their father. Their father was Tzlafchad, if you recall. They were the Benot Tzlafchad. And he was Hayayim Yotzei Mitzrayim. He was one of the people left Egypt, and he was over 20, right? We only count adults. And since he was over 20, he got a portion. He died in the desert, but he didn't lose that portion. So they got that portion. They split it 5 ways. Then they got Chelko Imachiv B'nichsei Chefer. Now, it turns out that Tzlafchad's father was Chefer, and Chefer left Egypt also, and also died in the desert. Okay? So Chefer had a portion. Chefer's portion went to all of his sons. One of his sons was dead, Tzlafchad. But as we've learned before, just because a person's dead does not mean they don't get nachla. So it went to Chefer, it went to Tzlafchad, let's say a quarter. We'll see how much in a second. And that portion went to his daughters. And the third portion was the fact that Tzlafchad was in fact the Bechor. So not only did Tzlafchad get a portion from his father Chefer, he got 2 portions from his father Chefer. Shahaya Bechor, because Tzlafchad was a Bechor, Notel Shnei Chalakim. So they got 2 portions in Chefer, 1 portion in Tzlafchad himself, because he basically double collected here, and therefore the daughters split 3 portions in the land. Now, some portions were bigger than others, you can imagine. We'll see in a second, because if Chefer had 4 children, each portion that he left was 1/5 of that, right? 4 plus 1 for a Bechor. Right, you always add 1 for the Bechor. So Tzlafchad got 2/5, let's say, of his father Chefer's portion, which went to his daughters, assuming he had 4 sons, and they got 1/100th of the 100% of the portion of their father Tzlafchad. So it's not exactly the same portions, but there was different portions that they got a chelik in. So that's the Mishnah. Now says the Gemara today on top of Daf Kuf Yud Zayin. Tnan. Now this Mishnah clearly is going Kiman Amra Liyotzei Mitzrayim Nitchaka Haaretz, according to the opinion that Eretz Yisrael was apportioned according to those who left Egypt. Ditanya. Now let's read this Braita, which goes in great detail for the next page actually, about how you decide to apportion the Nachala in Eretz Yisrael. Ditanya.
Aren't you giving them Chefer twice? Chefer got the. That's sorry, Chefer.
Tzlafchad.
Tzlafchad got 2 portions as a Bechor, right?
Correct.
So those 2 portions are then split by the daughters.
Correct. But now
how do you say he got another portion, that they got their father's portion? That was already included in the 2 portions of the Bechor.
Right, so that's exactly the point, is that everyone who left Egypt got their own portion. So if a father had 3 sons and they left Egypt, that family got a portion for the father and a portion for each of the sons if they were above the age of 20 at the time of the census. Okay, that's this opinion. That's not based on the family, it's based on the individuals in a family who left Egypt. And therefore, a family that had a lot of kids, in theory, could get a much greater portion of the land of Israel. Again, I just want to point out, when I say greater kids, more kids, that's more kids at the time of leaving Mitzrayim. Because when they get to Israel, they might have a whole different size of their family. 40 years later, right, a family could go from, 10 siblings to 10 descendants, or it can go from 3 siblings to 50 descendants, right? And so there could be a very vast disparity between the amount of land that each family, each person got. But let's read the Braita.
You're saying he got his own portion because he left Egypt.
Correct.
But he already got his portions from his father.
Correct. So I'm saying he got 2 and 3 because he's a Bechor. Titania. Now says the Braita, Reb Yeshaya Omer. Says Reb Yeshaya, the second line of Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph, Liyotzei Mitzrayim Nitchalka Haaretz. That the people, the way they decided to portion the land, the way God decided to portion the land was based on the individuals who left Egypt. Okay? Tishenemar, because the pasuk says, now this pasuk again is in the whole story of Tzlaf. It says, I'm going to read the whole pasuk here. It says, Ach, this is Bamidbar Chavav Nunhei, Ach Bagaro Yechaleket Haaretz, you should portion the land based on a lottery, Lishmot Matot Avotam Yinchalu. The names or the people of the tribes of their fathers, you should give it out. Now, we're going to learn in a minute, not in a minute, in a few minutes, that this does not mean you should give it out according to the tribes, which you would have said, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, etc. It means to the families who left Egypt. We'll see why we know that in a second. But that's what Rabbi Yeshaya says. Shenem, the pasuk says, L'shmot matot avotam yinchalu. You give it out to the names of the tribes of the fathers, which again, we're going to see are those who were in Egypt and left Egypt. Ella, the problem is, not the next pasuk, but the earlier pasuk said, "Le'ela tichalek haaretz benachala mispar shemot." Right? Moshe does a big census. He counts the people. He says there's 600,000 whatever people. Give it out le'ela. Give it to these, which implies that it's the ones I just counted at the end of 40 years in the desert who should be the deciders of what they get. So ask Rabbi Yeshaya, what about Elamani Mekayim, the fourth line now? How do I fulfill the pasuk that says le'ela tichalek haaretz? That you give it to these, meaning to these who are alive today, benachala, sorry. Le'ela is telling you ke'ela, that it means those who are like the ones alive today, lahotziat hatfalim, which excludes those who are minors, right? A tafel means a dependent. One who is not independent, but is dependent, does not get a portion. So meaning, you really don't give the Yerusha to the people who are alive and counted at the end of 40 years in the desert. It depends entirely on their forefathers who left Egypt. Anyone who was alive at the time left Egypt, as long as they were independent and not a tafel, they get a portion. And so the situation could be where a family could get 3 portions, right? If there's a father, a grandfather, a son who are all above 20, they get each independent portions. The father and grandfather ultimately die, and so the son will come in with 3 portions potentially if he has no brothers, right? So it does not depend on people alive at the time of entry to Israel. It depends on leaving Mitzrayim. And this, of course, can make a lot of sense with our Mishnah. That's the first opinion. Where am I? Yeah. Rabbi Yonatan Omer, the second opinion in the Braita, 6 lines from the top, is Rabbi Yonatan. Rabbi Yonatan says something totally different. He says, Liba'e ha'aretz nitchalka ha'aretz. That in fact, the land was proportioned according to those who came into the land of Israel. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, le'ela tichalek ha'aretz benachala. Give it to these people. Forget about who left Egypt for a second, not for too long. Those who walk into the land of Israel, the 600,000 people, they split it up. Each one gets 600,000, let's say, however the portions are, and they get the nachala. Now, of course, he doesn't mean that. And how do I know he doesn't mean that exactly? Is because the other pasuk says, Amani Mekayim. So how would I fulfill the pasuk of that it has to be based on the families who left Egypt, which we learn from the pasuk of L'shmot Matot Avotam Yinchalo, that you inherit based on the families. I'm going to use the word family for matot, but tribes, I guess. Families of the fathers who left Egypt. That tells you, says Rabbi Yochanan, something very interesting. Rashi quotes this in Chumash. Mishuneh nachla zu mikol nachlot sheba'olam. This inheritance was different than every other inheritance, right? Usually, when you talk about Yerusha, shekol nachalot sheba'olam, usually you talk about chayin yorshin metim. Usually, the living people yorish the ones who die, right? A person dies, patriarch dies, his property, could be hers too, goes to those who are alive. So Yerusha always works from the dead to the living, but this was different. Kan meitim yoshin chayim. Here, the dead people inherited the living people. So what does that mean? So I'm going to explain it outside, and then we're going to read a case inside that might clarify a little bit. The way Rabbi Yonatan understands this is that a family got land in Israel based on the number of people who went into the land of Israel. Okay, so let's take a case. You have 2 brothers. We'll call them Reuven and Shimon, though it'll be confusing because it's not the tribes. Reuven and Shimon leave Egypt. According to Rabbi Yeshaya's opinion, each one gets a portion of the land of Israel. If Reuven has 3 sons and Shimon has 1 son, then Reuven's 3 sons split 1 portion, who enter land of Israel. Shimon's 1 son gets the same portion as his father, Shimon's one son gets the same portion as his father. Says Rabbi Yonatan, it has nothing to do with the guys who left Egypt. It has to do with who goes into Israel. So if Reuven had 3 sons and they went into the land of Israel, Reuven's family gets 3 portions in Israel. Shimon's family gets 1 portion in Israel. But it doesn't stop there, because those are the living. The living then give that property to their parents. And so what ends up happening is that the Yerusha of the 3 sons of Reuven and the 1 son of Shimon go back to Reuven and Shimon. And so basically, Rashi understands it goes back to their grandfather. So basically, that family gets 4 portions. And then you go back to the family who left Egypt, and the family left Egypt was Reuven and Shimon. And so Reuven and Shimon then split 4 portions. So Reuven then gets 2 portions, and Shimon gets 2 portions. The brothers, because their grandfather, Reuven gets 2 portions. Shimon gets 2 portions. Now Reuven has 3 sons, so each of Reuven's sons gets 2/3 of a portion, because you divide his 2 portions by 3. Shimon has 1 son, so Shimon's son gets 2 portions. So in this telling, basically the Yerusha is based on the number of people who went into the land of Israel, but it doesn't go to the people who go into the land of Israel. It goes backwards to the dead, who are their fathers and grandfathers, gets redivided within the family. It does make a lot of sense, because basically you then are giving it based on, as the Torah says, those who went into the land of Israel, but you're giving it to the ones who left Egypt. Just to clarify, in the equivalent case, right? So this case, I want to clarify, it's a complicated case. Rashbam uses different numbers than I used. Reuven and Shimon come from one father, we call him Yaakov, and Reuven has 3 sons, Shimon has 1 son, right? So according to the first opinion, Rabbi Yeshaya, Reuven gets a portion, Shimon gets a portion. Reuven's 3 sons split a portion, so each one gets 1/3 of a portion, right? Shimon's son gets a portion, because he's the one who enters land of Israel. According to Rabbi Yonatan, you don't look at it that way. You look at it based on the ones who went into the land of Israel. Four grandchildren, 3 from Reuven, 1 from Shimon, enter the land of Israel. So they get 4 portions. You go backwards, though, and you reapportion those 4 portions to the family. So Yaakov's family gets 4 portions. 2 go to Reuven, 2 go to Shimon. Shimon's son gets 2 portions. Reuven's sons get 1/3 of 2 portions, so 2/3 of a portion. So it turns out that according to Rabbi Yonatan, each person gets more, right? Because they get 2/3 of the 4 portions, right? As opposed to 1/3, which would be in the original.
But
they don't get a full thing.
You got 2 problems I see. One is that you've chosen 2 sons, Reuben and Shimon. Now, and let's say they were from Yaakov. It's for argument's sake. But Yaakov had 12 sons. So that you should go back to Yaakov and divide 12 ways, because there were 12 sons, and then reapportion.
That's why I started.
The other thing is,
I guess I picked unfortunate names.
The second problem is that why do we arbitrarily choose Yaakov? Why not Yitzchak? How far back do you go? Because you could say
so your question is a very good question. Your question is a tough question that Rashi and Tosfos actually disagree about, which is how far do you go back? Rashi says the grandfather. Tosfos doesn't even like that. You're correct. It gets
Where's Rashi? Where Rashi where? In Chumash?
Rashbam, sorry, the Rashbam. But the truth is Rashi and Chumash says this, and Rashi elsewhere says this as well. But the Rashbam explains that opinion here. But let me just say this, that the key thing here. First of all, the first question, just to be clear, I picked names, so I should have.
I understand that, but that doesn't matter, the names. But I'm just saying,
suppose we'll go to 12 ways.
Sons.
Yeah, 100%. We'll go 12 ways. So but the point is, the simple point, and I'm oversimplifying here, is that it depends on who left Egypt, right? So assuming that there was one patriarch who left Egypt, that's the person who gets the Nachala. And whether it's a father or a grandfather, because obviously the 40 years passed till they went to Israel. So it's going to either be 1 generation or 2 generations. It can't be more than that. It's probably not going to be less than that. So meaning the point isn't so much as the way I'm explaining it, whether it's the son or the grandson, it's whether you basically have to take the people who enter Israel, who are above the age of 20, therefore they count, and use that number to decide how much this family gets retroactively, basically in Egypt. And so it is, just to be clear, it'll come out in this way, that it will be a higher number than with Rabbi Yeshaya, who said that it doesn't matter at all who comes into the land of Israel. So the fact that someone has 5 children or 10 children does not help them in any way. According to Rabbi Yonatan, it does help them. Because if you have 5 children or 10 children, you get a larger portion in the family, but you still have to split it among, let's say, the uncles. Says, let's give a mashal. Says Rebbe, 6 lines from the bottom, 7 lines from the bottom. Amar Rebbe, Emshol licham mashal lema davar domeh. Let me give you an example that you could sort of conceptualize what I just talked about. Let's say you have shnei achim kohanim. Let's say you have 2 brothers who are both kohanim. Shehayu be'ir achat. They live together. Beautiful family. The 2 brothers get along with each other. They live together. They raise their families together. They pay attention to daf yomi together.
So they're in the same city. They don't live in the same house.
Right, but we'll see why. We'll see why city matters in a second. Le'echad yesh lo ben echad. One of the brothers has 1 son. Le'echad yesh lo shnei banim. Another brother has 2 sons. Okay, so this of course happens in families all the time. V'holchu legoren. Now, these 2 brothers, time comes at the end of the season, around Sukkot time, where everyone gathers together their grain, right? And they go to split out, give the truma to the Kohanim. So the 2 brothers say to their children, kids, time to go out and get truma for our family. So these 3 sons now go to the Goren, right? 2 from one family, 1 from another. Zeh sheyesh lo ben echad notel chelek echad. The one who's got 1 son, he gets 1 portion because he's 1 person showing up. The one who's got 2 sons, they get 2 portions. But in order to keep the harmony and justice and peace in the house, they don't say, oh, this family has 2 sons, so they eat well, and the family has 1 son eats poorly. They come machsirin etzel avihem. They go back to their parents. They go back to the common communal family. V'chozrin v'chokim b'shaveh. And they would resplit it among the 2 families. They would say this family gets 50%, this family gets 50%. And so, again, none of this is required. This obviously is the kind of thing that people would make an agreement, right? They would basically say, we are going to share equally. One brother happens to have 2 sons, so he gets 2 portions. But that's not because he has more needs, right? Maybe he's got 5 daughters. I don't know. We don't really know. But he's got 2 sons, so his family needs 2 portions, gets 2 portions, but they don't need 2 portions. So they split it up among the family. Now that's Rebbe's example. Again, it's a very unclear example because it's just arbitrary almost, right? It's that these 2 brothers decided we're going to split all of our income, right? It doesn't seem like it's necessary. So that is the second opinion.
But that would seem that the one with 1, it's a smaller family. They're getting extra because they don't need as much as the family with 2 children.
100%. They are getting extra. But the point of Rebbe's point is that instead, remember, according to Rabbi Yeshaya, in this case, there are 2 brothers, they get 2 portions of truma. Rabbi Yeshaya is saying that what happens is there's 3 grandsons, let's say, or 3 sons, they get 3 portions, but they go back and split it up among their 2 households. Says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, it's both. It's a little bit of a combination. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, you know how it works? Turn the page to Daf Kuf Zayin Amud Bet. It actually, there's 2 ways to get Yerusha in Eretz Yisrael. You can either be one of the people left Egypt, or you could be someone who went into the land of Israel. So there's 2 ways to get a Yerusha. Le'elo ule'elo nitchalka aretz. You get one or the other. These and these, meaning, right? Let me read inside. Kedei lekayem shnei mikrot halalo. To explain the 2 psukim. One pasuk which implies it's based on those who left Egypt. One pasuk which implies it's based on those who are standing here today at the end of 40 years in the desert. How do you explain that? Says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, it's one of 2 options. You can either get a portion of the land of Israel because you left Egypt, or you can get a portion of the land of Israel because you actually went into the land of Israel. Right? Now let's read inside. Haketzad. Hayom yotzei Mitzrayim. If you're an individual who left Egypt and then you died, let's say, notel chelko im yotzei Mitzrayim. You get a chelek because you are of the class of the people who left Egypt. Hayom miba'ei haaretz. If you're a person who walked into the land of Israel, you actually survived the desert, then notel chelko im ba'ei haaretz. Okay? Now, this gets into complicated scenarios. Because what if you are both? Right? What if you are mikan umikan? What if you get from this side and that side? Then, says Reb Shimon ben Elazar, notel chelko mikan umikan. Then you would get a portion for both sides. You would get 2 portions. Now, of course, it's a little bit problematic here because what do you mean mikan umikan? Who in the world left Egypt and went into the land of Israel? There was no such class except for 2 people, Yeshua and Kalev. Because
could they choose? Is he saying they could choose either one they want?
No, they get 2 portions. Meaning you get
no, not that. Are we saying that when he says Could they choose which way they wanted to take the portions?
No, you would
Kate
get
said,
both.
could they choose? I could do this way
No,
or that way.
we're assuming at this point that every portion is the same, which is not going to be accurate eventually, but let's keep that assumption. Every portion is 50 acres or 5 acres or whatever. So you get a portion. If you left Egypt, you get a portion from the left Egypt pot, which is 5 acres. If you go into land of Israel, you get a portion from enter Israel portion plot, which is 5 acres. If you were both classes, meaning you left Egypt and you went into land of Israel, you get two portions. So I'm asking you, how could that be? Who left Egypt and went into Israel? So one answer.
Well, when it says it says leilu, does that mean the person could choose one or the other, or it doesn't matter, or it could?
As I said, you can't. The mission, as we said, you can't. You get both. If you exist in both, you get both. If you exist in one class, you get one class, right? So every family would come, and if they had people in their family who left Egypt, they would get a portion for each of those people. If they had people in their family who went into Israel, they get a portion for each of those people. If a family was both, then they would get both, as we just said. So let's read that second line again. Haketzad. No, sorry, the third line. Haya. No, fourth line. Mikan and Mikan. If you're both sides, I mean, you get Yotzei Mitzrayim and Ba'eretz, then Notel Chalko, Mikan and Mikan. You would get two chalakim, or at least two chalakim. So therefore, basically, what Shimon Lezer is saying is that the way we explain the psukim is that there's two ways to get nachala. You can either leave Egypt and then you get a portion, or you can enter Israel. Now, as I pointed out, there are very few people who fit both of those criteria because every single person who left Egypt who was 20 years old died in the desert, except for Yeshua and Caleb.
Well, the last group of people, the last year they were supposed to die, they laid down the graves and they didn't. They got up. So that group, that's the what? How many people were there? That the whole that 39th year, there was that whole people that they got out. They woke up the next. It was a surprise. It was the Mefarshim talk about it. Gemara, the Rashi. So they didn't die. That last whole group of people.
Okay, so they got a lot of space, but Yeshua and Caleb for sure got all that possessions. Now, while we're talking about Yeshua and Caleb, says the Gemara continues, Miraglim. Remember, there were 12 men well, 10 who were bad, but 12 men ultimately who went as spies to the land of Israel. There's a special decree that they lost their portion of the land of Israel. But they didn't lose any Yerusha. Their portion was given, Miraglim, Yoshua and Caleb, not to do Chalkam. Yoshua and Caleb got their portions. Yoshua and Caleb made out pretty well. Okay, so the portion of Miraglim, now their children, of course, are going to be very sad, but the children of the Miraglim, the Miraglim themselves lost their portion. So what do we do? We're going to see. Mitloninim, those who were complainers, we'll see later as how, a lot of different kinds of complainers in the desert, but let's just say the regular complainers, right? And the Adat Korach, those who rebelled against Moshe, and the 250 men who joined Korach and got swallowed up by the land, Lo hayilhem chelik be'aretz. They did not get chelik in the land. They didn't get any portion of the land. So what about their children? What if a poor child, his father was a rebel, right? So the father died. This kid now is both an orphan and he has no land, but he's not from Shevet Levi. What's he supposed to do? Says the Braita, Banim, if they're sons, hopefully they had grandparents, right? And so their grandparents left Egypt and had a portion, and so they get a zchut from the avi aviem. It might be a very small portion, because by that point it has to split many, many ways, but they'll get some small portion of the land. Ubischut avimotehem, and they could get from their mother's fathers, right? Because remember, you inherit that way if such a situation occurs. Now, ask the Gemara. The whole assumption of our Braita is that there's one pasuk that says la'ela tichalek aretz, meaning those who are alive now when we enter the land, and there's a second pasuk that says, as we quoted on the top, that liyotzei mitzrayim nitchalka aretz, because it said shmot matot avotam yinchal. Ask the Gemara now, halfway down Kuf Yadzayin Amabet, my mashma dahai l'shmot matot avotam biyotzei mitzrayim ktiv. How do you know that when Moshe says from God, give the Yachala to the Shmot Matot Avotam, the names of the tribes of the families, right? Of their fathers, sorry. That it means those who left Egypt. Maybe it doesn't mean that at all. Maybe Dilma l'Shvatim Kamerle. Maybe it's saying based on Shmot Matot Avotam, which goes the original Matot, the original tribes, which are the 12 sons of Yaakov. Maybe the Torah is saying, split up the Yerusha, not according to those who were in Egypt, but according to the tribes. And then potentially each tribe will get an equal portion. So the fact that Yehuda was much bigger than done, let's say, shouldn't really have an impact, right? They should go according to the tribes. So maybe it means that. Says the Gemara, it can't mean that. Because it says, and this is again way back when Hashem's talking to Moshe in the beginning. Hashem says to Moshe, I'll read the pasuk in Va'era, V'haveti etchem el haaretz. I'm reading the whole pasuk now. I'm bringing you to the land of Israel. Asher nasati et yadi latet ota la'Avraham Yitzchak and Yaakov. I was going to give it. I gave it to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and now we're reading the main words. The natati ota lachem. I will give it to them, morasha, as inheritance, ani Hashem. So Moshe is going to talk to Bnei Yisrael in Egypt, right? This is during the Makot already, and beginning right before the Makot. And Moshe says, I'm giving it to you. To you, meaning it has to be given to the people who are in Egypt. So it has to be based on those who were there, and let's read that inside. Tichtiv anatati oto lachem morasha ani Hashem, Yerusha hi lachem me'avotechem. It's a Yerusha to you from your forefathers. Uli yotzei Mitzrayim. Kamalu. Moshe was talking to the people they weren't quite yotzei Mitzrayim yet. They were still in Mitzrayim, but they were the ones who were about to leave Egypt. And so clearly Moshe promises the people in Egypt a portion in the land. So from that, you see that the land has to be apportioned not based only on those who enter the land, but on those who leave Egypt. The machloka we had in the Braita was is it either just those who leave Egypt? It doesn't matter. You can have 10 kids in the desert, they still only get one portion. Is it both those who leave Egypt and those who come to the land of Israel, meaning that you basically give it to the ones who leave Egypt, but it's based on the number of children or grandchildren they had entering the land of Israel? Or the third opinion is that you can get one land in one of two ways. You can either be a Egypt leaver, Yotzei Mitzrayim, or you can be a Aretz, someone who comes into the land of Israel. Now, let's do a little bit more because it's a short daf, and even though tomorrow is also a short daf, but it's not as short. Says the Gemara, Siman l'Rav Tzlafchan Yosef Ichbal Menashe. Well, we see what that is. 3 lines from the bottom. Amar le Rav Papa le'Abaya. Now, Bishlo Naman da Amar. I understand. If you are of the opinion that the entire the Tanakhama, Rabbi Yeshaya, right, that the entire way that the land was apportioned was those who left Egypt. Okay, so again, 2 men left Egypt. Each one gets a portion. One has 10 grandchildren going, or 10 children going to Israel. One has 1 child going to Israel. They get the same family portion. One family gets a 10th. One family gets 1. Right, per kid. So therefore, it makes sense when it says the Rav tarben nachlato ulema'at tamit nachlato. That if you have many, now we understand here that many means many who leave Egypt, right? Then you get more nachala, and if you have few who leave Egypt, you get less nachala. Meaning, the words ta'amit means your nachala gets smaller because you had fewer people leaving Egypt. So even though you might have an equivalent situation of 3 grandchildren entering the land of Israel, if you had more ancestors, you get a bigger part. If you have fewer ancestors, you get a smaller part. Elamanda Amar Lebai Aretz, right? According to the one who says that it's based on the ones who enter the land of Israel, it doesn't mean anything. Every single person gets the same portion. So my lerav tarbu nachlato. What does it mean that if you come from a big family, you get more nachala? No one gets more nachala, right? Because it doesn't matter how many forefathers you had or how many brothers you have. Every single person who walks into the land of Israel gets 5 acres or whatever portion we say. So what do you mean if you came from a Rav, you get a bigger nachala? Nobody gets a bigger nachala. So according to Rabbi Yeshaya, many people get a bigger nachala and many people get a smaller nachala. It depends on whether you had a lot of grandfathers or not so many grandfathers, right? Everyone has the same number of grandfathers, but right, it depends on how many brothers you had to share it with, right? How many uncles, essentially. But according to Rabbi Yonatan, it doesn't really make any sense. It says Kasha. In fact, that is a little bit of a problem because it doesn't really change, right, the amount of nachla any individual gets, because every single person entering the land of Israel gets the same portion. Okay, now, of course, of course, it could depend on the family, right? The answer Yonatan would have to give is that although each individual gets the same portion, some families within a tribe get bigger portions, some get smaller. Because if the family had 10 sons, then they're going to get 10 portions, and they're going to have a huge compound for Beit El Azraki, and another chain of that family is going to get a much smaller portion. but the actual psukim are a little bit more problematic. And we're going to stop here and can pick it up from the second line tomorrow morning as we continue this discussion about how the Nachla was a portion among those who left Egypt and those who entered the land of Israel.
What about the third opinion? Or we don't mention it here.
So the third opinion actually works a little okay because according to the third opinion, you can get it either way, right? So you can get Nachala from leaving Egypt or from entering. And so if you had a big family who left Egypt, let's just say, right, then you would, even though you'd be one individual, you'd get a large portion.
So can they choose which way they want to take it then? If
Get
they can
both.
get either way,
Presumably you get both.
they get both from from the family origin that left plus those that entered. So they get
Correct.
both.
Correct. You get both. But remember that a person, let's just say you could be fortunate or unfortunate. A person can have, three ancestors who left Egypt and that leave one grandson. And that grandson might get three portions because his father got one, his father's father got one, his mother's father got one. I guess that wouldn't go to him, but unless there were no sons. But so meaning in theory, a person, let's say a person has no brothers, right? They have a father and a grandfather. Let's say their father and grandfather are both alive and over the age of 20 when they left Egypt. That grandson will get two portions because of that. If he's over 20 when he enters Israel, he'll get one more portion because of himself. So you might end up with three portions, right? But he gets from Yotzei Mitzrayim and he gets from Nichnasim by arts. That's the third opinion.
So that's not necessarily more. Well, it depends. I mean, whatever.
Right, 100%. It's not, none of
Not
it's
necessarily more,
necessary.
not necessarily less. I mean,
Correct.
it could be, it may not be more, it may not be less.
Correct. It all depends. Okay, we're gonna stop here. Listen, over the last days of holiday, I'm here, so
Well, you're here this time for
I'm
this
finally
holiday?
here, finally. So hopefully on
That's pretty
Thursdays,
rare.
on Shmini Atzeret and Simchas Torah, hopefully we'll learn in person.
Uh,
Because we can't do it on Zoom. So we could talk more as we get closer. We'll put in this in the WhatsApp.
mm.
We'll find a time. I mean, I'm very flexible.
Well, there is a community-wide event about an hour before Mincha on Shmini
Okay.
Atzeret.
Well, so we're not going to do it then. So we're part of the community. Okay, we'll be in touch. Chag Sameach, Moedim L'Simcha. We
Morim
will
L'Simcha,
learn
Morim
soon.
L'Simcha.
Okay, bye.
Mm. 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 Rabbi, he said, What are you, packaging things now?
No, I'm looking, I think, it was a few pizza, we did eat,
Okay, good,
but the eggs not.
okay, good.
That's not what.
So what are you gonna do with it now?
I'm gonna eat it,
Now, at this hour?
the egg,
At this hour?
yeah.
Okay, at this hour. Where are you gonna put it now?
Counting how many,
You're counting the eggs?
no, how many pizzas I had,
How many are there?
4. No, cause the pizza from the and I put in a plastic bag like this,
And
it's not here,
maybe it's somewhere else.
why?
I don't know.
You took one? I don't think so. I mean, if you did, we ate it, unless you have it in your bed somewhere, I don't. It was eaten, I couldn't eat it.
I took 3 yesterday. I ate 1.
Oh. Then I guess but they're not left, right? I'm gonna eat them.
I wanted the,
I don't know how many I had because I had pieces. Trying to find it.
my bag isn't here. And then ate 1 for lunch. And then ate 1 at Sudashi sheet, right? Yeah. I ate 1 at lunch. And I brought 3 for lunch. I ate 1 at lunch. And then I ate 1 at Sudashi sheet.
Oh, so then it was eaten, 'cause I certainly ate the equivalent of one, I think, so, okay, so it's eaten, that's all. I don't have to. Huh? What? You put it there.
No, I don't think so. No. Where did you take that 1? You going outside?
No,
Right here with that thing?
yeah.
Yes, so thank you.
No, it's that. It's that. That is not so bad. Yeah, it's not even bad. Oh,
Let's see what image.
well, that's stand right with this stuff. I mean, no, why is it all pop?
Yeah.